This is Amber Gonzalez for English 1B at Saddleback College. Overcoming inequality in today's progressive era. The LGBT strife against workplace discrimination. Legal discrimination? Are there options for change? The controversy I'm researching is that of the legality of workplace discrimination to members of the LGBT community, and also the various options available to specify the inclusion of gender identity and sexual orientation in order to provide protection from under the law. Constitutional connection. The amendment that best relates to my issue is Amendment number 14, which guarantees equal protection of the laws for all United States citizens. My controversial issue regarding Amendment number 14 also flows into the Civil Rights Act of 1964, and more specifically, Title VII of that Civil Rights Act that outlaws discrimination based on race, color, religion, sex, or national origin. The correlation with my issue is the various degrees of interpretation, or rather, the lack thereof, within that title. Specifically, the interpretation of the use of the word sex not representing inclusivity enough to completely cover gender identity or sexual orientation. Why this strife? Bostock v. Clayton County. I chose this topic after doing the reading and working on the writing assignment given in week 9. Although reading through the Supreme Court cases wasn't the most enthralling reading assignment, one case really stuck out to me. Bostock versus Clayton County. To give you a little more background on the case, if you hadn't previously read it, Gerald Bostock worked for the Georgia County Child Welfare Services for over a decade. After he joined a gay softball league, on his own time and of his own volition, and upon his fellow co-workers learning of his participation, he was let go from employment due to, and I quote, unbecoming conduct. Upon learning of the details of the case, I was actually shocked that the basis was even up for debate at all. Living in such a progressive state as California, I wrongly assumed that discrimination of sexual orientation was illegal across the board and across all states. Upon researching further on the issue, I discovered that there are actually loopholes in the legislation that allows these things to periodically happen. Source number 1. Of course, I found the library databases an extremely useful research tool. But in this presentation, I would like to discuss 2 other sources that surprised me with the most help thus far. The first being an extremely helpful advantage I feel that I have on this topic is simultaneously being enrolled in American politics. I'm using the textbook for that class as a source. It is entitled We the People and was written by Benjamin Ginsberg, Theodore Loewy, Caroline Tolbert, and Margaret Weir. Throughout the semester, I've learned much about the Constitution and how delegated and implied powers are given to the various sects of government, including that of the judicial branch. Constitutional law and the Supreme Court power of interpretation provide a great insight into not just the why, but the how as well. This provides information into exactly what can and cannot be accomplished with my issue. I believe this source is extremely credible due to the main author, Benjamin Ginsberg, being the professor of political science at Johns Hopkins University, and the other authors being involved in political science departments at their various universities as well. Source number 2. A business owner's perspective. Another insightful source was interviewing a small business owner on her perspective of the current law. It was helpful discussing how the law of protection does not apply to a business under 15 employees and what that means. Although there is no obligation of protection for her employees due to the size, it was suggested from the business owner that it boils down to more of a moral obligation. When discussing the 15-employee requirement for the law, she stated, and I quote, "I kind of just visualize it as being a part of it, like as if I was more than 15 employees, because I don't want to even get in the gray area." Interestingly enough, she also mentioned there might be different mindsets between owners of a business in a liberal state like California and that of a less progressive state like Georgia. I believe this interview to be a very useful source in that most of my other research information revolves around the perspective of larger businesses that mostly qualify for protection under Title VII. The potential weaknesses of using an interview as one of my sources would be that there is only one business owner interviewed. There also might be discrepancies in answers between a female owner's perspective and a male owner's perspective. Working in a health field and working mostly with children may also yield different responses than someone not in such a specific industry. Also, with an interview on such a hot-button topic such as LGBT workplace discrimination, one has to also consider response bias when conducting an interview. Response bias is the potential for the interviewee to respond with answers that don't 100% reflect their viewpoints. All in all, I plan on using both sources in my arguments because they not only offered great information, but they also helped me further analyze my topic in a multitude of various ways. Progress. Thus far, I have a solid 5 pages without adding my source material. The initial problems I had with this issue was trying to find multiple arguable points from the opposition's perspective besides the most obvious one. It's actually quite difficult to find viewpoints against a human rights issue in which to counter in the research paper. But I found that playing devil's advocate and looking at the bigger, broader picture involving both sides and emotions really helped. It's a work in progress, but I feel that with my business owner's perspective, I was provided with the insight that I was missing to allow myself to think outside the box. This concludes my presentation. Thank you so much for watching.